Hello, this is the Captain Paxer with a video that I should have made quite some time ago now. An introduction to my channel. Well, sort of. Maybe a little more too, because why not? In case you don't know, a channel by the name of Dark Hero Gaming had the brilliant idea of creating the Monster Hunter tag, in which content creators answer a couple of questions relating to the Monster Hunter franchise, just to, let people know a little bit about them and maybe help introduce people to other content creators. And I thought, that sounds like fun, so I'm gonna give that a go. So this video is in part a video for the Monster Hunter tag, but I'm also using it to introduce you lovely folks to my humble channel. So I've got some timestamps in the description in case you want to skip a certain part. Otherwise, I'm going to jump straight into the Monster Hunter tag of the segment. Wrong way around. Otherwise, I'll jump straight into the Monster Hunter tag segment of the video. Got it that time. Just real quick before I get into the Monster Hunter tag, I want it known that if I had a way to record footage for the Switch, then the gameplay you're watching would all be GU. Seriously, I just love GU so much more than World. Just a personal thing. What got you into the Monster Hunter series, and what do you like about it most? I've had a bizarre relationship with Monster Hunter. You see, the first game I played was Freedom. Not Freedom Unite, Freedom. Yeah, real old school. Of which this cool cat played for a grand total of about 4 hours. Yep, that's right, only 4 hours into Freedom. You see, back then, I was a real dumb kid who didn't appreciate difficult games that had little of a way in the tutorial, and refused to look up guides for portable games, despite being perfectly fine with doing the same for console games to the point of spoiling the entirety of Dark Souls 1. Yeah. I didn't understand the menus, the crafting, or the controls, especially that god-awful camera, which is, you had to do the claw thing on the PSP if you wanted to control both the camera and the movement, which I kind of just naturally assumed because that's kind of how I play games. Like, that is just a natural formation for my hands. I didn't even realize it was like a very specific thing that had like a whole term or anything. I just thought it was normal. Anyway, the thing that really got me to never play much of Freedom, oh, this is embarrassing, was the time limit on missions. Yeah, that 50-minute time limit on gathering quests stressed me out enough to quit Monster Hunter Freedom. Yeah, I was that much of a loser. But several years later, and a love affair with Dark Souls had me thirsting for a game in which you hunt down and slay these great beasts. And I'm not just talking about dragons here. I mean all kinds of beasts in all different shapes and sizes. But I could never quite find that game because I never looked hard enough, and more importantly, I never looked back at Freedom. So, of course, when World started getting hyped up, I knew that this was the game that I had been waiting for. And in the months leading up to the release, I went back to try out Freedom again, only to remember, oh yeah, I sold my PSP about a year ago, didn't I? However, there was a silver lining. World would soon be released, and I managed to play one of the betas, thankfully, of which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I'd also recently gotten a 3DS for Pokemon, of all things, so I could get Monster Hunter of there, of which I did after World released. Anyway, bought World on release and have fallen in love with the series. Since then, I bought Generations for 3DS and Generations Ultimate for Switch, which is my favourite Monster Hunter so far, and apparently 4U is even better, which makes me really want a 4U remake for Switch, because frankly, I'm not going to get it on 3DS. As for what I like most about Monster Hunter, well, I think a better question would be, what don't I like about Monster Hunter? I mean, seriously, I could go on for hours about the things that I love about this series. And I have, by the way. I do it in the Weekly Hunt series. They come from a place of inexperience, but they're an honest representation of my feelings on the game. If I could only choose one thing, ooh, I think it would... Oh, this is going to be a cop-out, but I'm going with it anyway. It would have to be just how much passion is poured into these games. Because that passion results in everything that everyone loves about the series being as good as it is. And if that passion wasn't there, then so much of Monster Hunter just wouldn't be the same. And I don't think that the series would ever have gotten as popular as it has. What are some of my favourite moments / memories playing Monster Hunter? Where do I even begin with this question? After all, one of the things that I love about Monster Hunter is just all of the amazing memories that it creates. I mean, so few games are good enough to create as consistently memorable experiences as Monster Hunter does. So I could say the first time playing Freedom, getting hyped by the opening cutscene because it's a fucking cool opening cutscene, or when I looked through the Forge for the first time and saw the Bone Greatsword, which made me instantly want to get it, which I did in World, because I had never actually figured out where to get the materials to make it. Yeah, I was a real scrub. Or maybe the time when I discovered what the Paratoad does, in the exact same way as everybody else. Walking up to it, hitting the button prompt, then watching it inflate. I called to my buddy, who he walked over to inspect the toad with me, and then poof, it exploded with paralytic gas and was on the floor like, ah! Like, okay, let's not kick the Paratoads. That seems like a bad idea. Until later that hunt, the Anjanath stood right on top of one. I put 2 and 2 together and went, I'm gonna go over there. Ran over, kicked it, managed to get out of the way before it paralyzed the Anjanath. I was like, yes! I figured out how to use these things correctly. Felt like a real champ. Even though that's like a pretty standard move now. But yeah, we never did manage to beat that Anjanath. At least not in the beta. Again, a lot of these tales are told in my weekly hunt series. If you have time for them, they are rather lengthy. But I think my best one from World is when I was in town, like in real life, not just a stare, it's like real town where I live. And I walked past a pink car and a blue car that were very similar in design. I went, ooh, Pink Rathian and a Rathalos, because why not? Why wouldn't my brain make that connection? You know, it's pink and it's blue and they look similar. It's Pink Rathian and Rathalos. Sure, why not? Brain's obsessed with Monster Hunter right now. It's gonna do whatever it can to continue thinking about Monster Hunter. A much shorter story or memory. This is actually in a video on my channel called That's Yellow Card. I'll put the link in the description. Really short. What happens is I go up to interact with a Paratoad that's next to a Great Jagras, and the act of my character kicking the Paratoad actually dealt damage to the Great Jagras, which I didn't know was possible. But the thing that made it so amazing is that it broke its leg and caused the Jagras to get knocked over. It's, okay, didn't know that was a thing, but now I do. Cool, that's never going to come up and be useful ever again. But in this one instance, it was. As for Generations and GU, well, there's a bit of a list. Beating Shigaro Megala on my first attempt without carting in the village quest. That was pretty awesome. And then I proceeded to get triple carted by Snow Baron Lagombi in the hub. Yeah. That went from feeling undefeatable to feeling like the worst player ever in about the time it takes to kill a Great Jagras. Well, I tell a lie. It wasn't a triple cart because I had both Feline Moxie and Feline Insurance, so I quad carted even with Moxie active. Yeah. Beating Snow Baron Lagombi for the first time was pretty good as well, because he walled me, much like Volhazak walled me. only I was on multiplayer and was still getting walled by the Snow Baron. But yeah, I was still had fun, you know. Or when I joined a Red Helm hub, only for the host to get triple carted. Ugh. He was using a hunting horn. Shout out to all my dupe bros out there. And used the Hunter Art Invigorate, which for a short time causes your performance to give you a dodge roll when you press the performance button. It's straight up one of the best hunting horn Hunter Arts. So he used the performance, which moved him away from Red Helm. And then the Red Helm started his uppercut attack, which is like his most powerful move and hits like a tempered Black Diablos. It's ridiculous. This player then used the performance dodge again, this time dodging into Red Helm, as Red Helm was still winding up the attack. It was then as if his character looked me straight in the eye and was like,
"Not like this."
Boom! Quest failed. I'm pretty sure he left with him. He quit with embarrassment after that, because... Ouch. I think the memory that tops all others for GU is when I went up against the Dread Queen Rathian for the first time. Alone, because I didn't want to pay for Nintendo Online. And even though I had completed the story at this point, it still took me a crazy amount of time to just bring it down low enough for capture, you know? Like there was a thought at the 35-minute mark where I was like, I'm about to put 50 minutes into this hunt, which, to tell you the truth, this hunt isn't particularly difficult, it's just Dread Queen 1. It's still low rank. And I was about to get nothing out of it. Like, I hadn't even cut off its tail. It was ridiculous. But thankfully, at the 40-minute mark, it was ready for capture. So, in that sense, I just like, yes, finally, I can capture this. I'm not gonna fail. Yes, we can do this. So I placed the trap down, and like right at a zone entrance, which in hindsight was a really bad idea because the Rathian then charged forwards. I panic, dodged backwards deeper into the end of the zone, and almost load into the next zone. If I had done that, then the Rathian would have had enough time to break out of the trap, which could have been really, really bad. But thankfully, didn't quite do that. Hit him with the trank bombs, captured the Dread Queen Rathian. Hell yeah! It was pretty serious. Adrenaline to the point of, well, my knees were trembling, which is a bit dramatic, I know, but let's just say my body doesn't handle that kind of stress particularly well. Like, it was very, very dramatic relief where, yes, dropped to the floor on my knees, just yelling at the sky, I did it! Anyway, I check my rewards and see that I've got more than enough scales to make the armor that I wanted. And, you know, going back to the armor, like, yes, I got all the things I need, I can make this piece of armor, and there's no song with that. So then I go to check the piece of armor, and why can't I make it? What's going on here? Check requirement, material oh, it's not scales in it. Oh, it's shells. Oh, and I only have one of 3. Oh, fuck. Oh god, that's really all there is to that. One that I got recently, though, is I was in the G-Rank hub, which, yes, I finally played G-Rank, first G-Rank experience, woo! I ended up getting into a hub with a player whose character name was Sir Jacob, and the reason why I'm saying this is, well, it will come in relevant later. We did a bunch of hunts, we were doing really well. This guy is like the host of the hub, and he's like, is everyone okay if we do some Prowler quests? And I'm like, I can do it, and I have a decent Prowler. Everybody else fucking leaves, because nobody likes Prowlers apparently. So we do a bunch of Prowler quests, by by ourselves. Really cool dude, you know, really friendly, talking a lot, you know, and then we were doing a quest just to take out like some congas, like, really nothing significant, but still good fun, because, you know, you're playing with someone that you actually like and you're communicating with, having a good time. And I was like, I'm going to send this person a friend request. Of course, after the hunt, you know, because that just makes sense, right? Halfway through this quest, I get fucking disconnected. And now because I don't know his Nintendo Online friend code, because his in-game name was Sir Jacob, but that's not necessarily his Nintendo Online ID, and that's not how you find people with their Nintendo Online ID. Like, they have their own code, so I couldn't send him a friend request, and I'm really fucking annoyed about it because he was a really cool dude. So Jacob, if you're listening and you've played with Ceres, Cerys, you know, fucking hit me up. I want to play with you more. You're a really cool dude. Do some prowler hunts, you know? I'm under no illusion that that's actually going to happen, though. Like, that would be very naive of me. What is your favourite Monster Hunter monster and why? So, I had a really big script written out for this, which talked about how much I love Diablos, despite the fact that he's never given me trouble. I know how he tends to be a wall for most players, but difficulty is subjective, so one hunter's hell can be another hunter's hammer fodder. You know, not even tempered Black Diablos ever roughed me up that much in World. But then, I completed the high rank hub in Generations Ultimate, and went to do the Urgent to get into G rank, which is a Diablos quest, which then said Diablos proceeded to become the hunter in an epic role reversal where I became the prey. And considering how much shit I talked about Diablos in my previous script, I basically had to do this. So then, favourite monsters. This is really difficult for me, as my favourite monster can change more frequently than British weather, so if you ask me again in a couple weeks, then it's likely my answers change slightly. Also, I don't feel like I have an adequate amount of experience fighting most of the monsters in GU and World, so I think it would be a little ignorant of me to compare two different monsters in terms of how much I like them, because I do not know enough about the monsters I'm comparing, if that makes sense. Lack of information usually leads to lapses in judgment. However, there are a couple of monsters that I can definitely say I like more than most. If I'm practicing a new weapon or style, then I tend to really like to fight Naga Cougar because he's super aggressive and super agile, so you have to learn what attacks are safe for a quick bit of damage and how to approach an evasive monster that just won't sit still, and trying to look for those opportunities to be able to use your stronger moves. Though it has to be said, I don't like fighting him if I'm brand new to a weapon or style, because then it just kind of gets ugly. Past that though, I don't have any one monster that I love to fight more than the rest, so I'm gonna have to say Zamtros is one of my favourites, not because of the fight, but because Shark Frog that can flash freeze ice armor onto his body and inflate like a balloon and then do his best space opera impression. I mean, come on. He's so cool. Shame it's a super easy fight though. What is your favourite weapon to use? Well, in video games I tend to try as many different gameplay options as there are available to me in said game, which is basically a fancy way of saying I like variety in my gameplay. And because of that, I can safely say I'm proficient with every weapon in World, however that's definitely not the case in Generations Ultimate. So again, placing my finger on a favourite is very difficult for me because I like nearly all of the weapons. For World, the weapon that I played the most is the Sword and Shield. It has speed, mobility, and what it lacks in range it makes up for in precision and the ability to deal both cutting and blunt damage of equal degrees. Also, you don't have to sheath your weapon to use items, which barely matters in World because all weapons have a fairly safe sheath animations because you get full control of your movement, unlike in Generations Ultimate. It's also less of a deal because you can move while using items, which allows you to simply walk out of range of monster attacks as opposed to risking it for a biscuit or a mega potion. So yeah, there's a couple of reasons why I prefer GU, but that's a video in of itself. So back to weapons. The SNS is the weapon I've spent the most time with in World, but that's not to say anything bad about the other weapons. Surprisingly, I've also had a lot of fun with the dual blades, which is I find really interesting because when I first played the World Beta, I really hated both the Sword and Shield and the dual blades. I didn't understand them at all. In fact, I only picked them up after I completed the main story and was testing out other weapons. Who knew that they would become my favourites? But then again, I hated the Lance based on the World Beta, but then proceeded to main it in full release. Of course, until SNS took over. The Lance just has such a powerful defense that allows you to stick to a monster's face and they just can't get rid of you. You are the immovable object, unless you actually want to move. Because despite what most people think, the Lance is actually pretty mobile. Sure, you can't move like you can with a Sword and Shield, but with the 3 evades that the Lance gets, or per pause, I suppose, and you know, the shield advance to give you that guard point, and the charge, you can get to places if you need, you know? And it is at this point that I realised that I've just mentioned 3 of my favourite weapons in World, and they're all really good at dealing status and elemental damage thanks to their attack speed. I just like me some statuses, you know, poison, paralysis. Oh, this is really nice. I mean, that's how I beat Tempered Kieran in under 5 minutes so consistently. Just spam the shit out of my sleep bombing bow set, you know? Seriously, if you're ever having difficulties with a monster, get yourself the Uragan bow, make a sleep bomber set, and spam the shit out of it. Make sure you have crafting materials so you can make more coatings whenever you run out. And if you run out of crafting materials, then you can just go back to camp and resupply. It's pretty busted. Also, a quick mention for the Switch Axe, since I fell in love with it when I figured out that you can recharge the sword energy by performing a morph attack from sword into axe. It kind of makes both forms of the weapon work with each other. Like it puts them together, combine them to create the Switch Axe. Plus, the range of the axe made me think about the moveset of each form and which one to use depending on the scenario. Like, if I want to cut the tail, then I'm probably going to need the axe because it has just that much better reach. You know, it made me want to use both forms depending on the situation as opposed to using one form when the other just wasn't ready. Charge Blade. However, Generations is a different story. I started out with the Sword and Shield, because it's the best weapon in the game. And I tried out bow a few times to try and get used to the different control scheme, though I never quite managed it until Generations Ultimate. I also messed around a bit with longsword and greatsword, and only recently started playing Insect Glaive, and even more recently have I picked up the other best weapon in the game, the Hunting Horn. Yep, the Hunting Horn. Now, GU is a bit more complicated than World because each weapon has a different moveset based on the style that you use, of which there are 6. This segment's gone on really long already, so I'll try to keep this brief. I love Alchemy Sword and Shield because the weapon retains the majority of its moveset, and in this game being able to use items without sheathing is a much bigger deal, thus complementing the Alchemy barrel. Plus, Sword and Shield has some god tier hunting hearts, of which Alchemy style gets 3. I also love Striker Hunting Horn because once again it still has a decent moveset, and being able to have 3 styles for Hunting Horn is pretty nifty since Invigorate, one of the Hunting Horn arts, acts as a powerful dodge, meaning you don't have to rely on Adept or Valor style for avoiding crazy attacks. Alternatively, I can just get good at dodging, which is something I'm trying to do by dropping Adept and Valor, which act as crutches for dodging attacks. I also want to experiment more with Insect Glaive, Longsword, Gun Lance, Dual Blades, and Bow. But for now, I'm just maining Alchemy SNS and Striker Doot and Toot. Although, again, even more recently, I have been trying out Aerial and Valor Gun Lance, and I have to say, is there a bad Valor style? Like, I don't think there's a single bad Valor style, because Gun Lance gets a freaking guard point on its quick reload, which reloads the majority of your shells, and it amps the shelling, where you can repeatedly fire up to as many times as you have shells, and if you do it consecutively, then the next shell gets more and more powerful, so, you know, just ridiculous. Anyway, why is that your channel name? My channel name. It's a rather simple story, relatively, I think. When I first got Xbox Live, I wanted a gamertag that didn't have any numbers in it, because needing numbers in your gamertag shows a lack of creativity. At least in my 13-year-old mind, that's how that worked, and to an extent, I still hold that opinion. So my first attempt at creating a gamertag was a reference to the Legend of Spyro trilogy. Probably because to this day it's my favourite video game franchise of all time, despite it being kinda bad. The reference was the name of a common enemy, Poison Tooth, which wasn't a type of enemy, but rather, in the Legend of Spyro, the main enemies had unique names despite being identical grunts, which one of the surnames was Poison Tooth, and because back then I was 13, I had a moderate amount of angst, and so that's what I wanted. Of course, because it was angsty, it was taken, and I would have had to put numbers in it to have it, so I looked for an alternative, of which I found Frost Touch, which was a similar reference to The Legend of Spyro. However, I really didn't like it as my gamertag. I didn't see it as being my gamertag, because I kind of took it out of necessity, if that makes sense. So I began to look for a replacement. Eventually, I found a reference to something that I hold quite dear, something that played a significant part in my childhood. Red Dwarf! A sci-fi sitcom where a human, a hologram, an android, a deranged ship computer, and a creature that evolved from a cat are stranded 3 million light years into deep space, and it just follows the nonsense that they get up to. Captain Paxo then is a very specific reference to one of the episodes in Season 2 called Stasis League, where Rimmer thinks that he's hallucinating because 48 hours ago he ate some hallucinogenic mushrooms and, well, hallucinated. Which of course he isn't. The captain of the ship, I should mention in this scene, it's set in the past, back when everyone was still alive. So the captain walks in and he's dressed as a chicken, for a fancy dress party later. Rimmer, who, like I said, believes he's hallucinating, starts to insult the captain to try and get him to leave. And one of those things that he says is,
"Did you indeed? How sad for you, Captain Paxo."
"Hey, there it is. Because Paxo is actually a brand of, like, chicken stuffing. So that's the joke. Funny. That's where my name came from. I didn't have to put any numbers in it to keep it. Yay! It's original. I mean, come on, let's be honest. It's not like there's another YouTube channel out there with the same name. Oh, that's really awkward. So, now that you're here, you might be wondering, what is it I do exactly on my channel? At the moment, it's a bit all over the place. I've currently got a bow-only playthrough of Dark Souls Remastered to complete, and then the only consistent content will be Mass Effect 3 multiplayer commentaries. One of the things you'll learn very quickly about me, if you haven't already, is that I just love to talk about video games. It's one of my favourite things to do besides playing video games, which is why I've now started to work on some pretty hefty videos in an attempt to express that. I'm currently working on a review of a trilogy of games that's nearly 15 years old, and I'm nowhere near finishing it. My dumb guesstimated calculations tell me that the script is going to be close to 400 pages of size 11. Wait, what? No, that can't be right. Let me just calculate it again. Okay, so there's... the dumb guesstimated calculations, 400 pages of size 11. Right, okay. Who knows? The point is that it's going to be huge, undoubtedly the biggest undertaking of my life, at least so far. But I don't want to just leave you guys with the occasional Mass Effect video in between now and the release of this review, so I'm going to be working on some reviews for episodes of Doctor Who, because I really like Doctor Who, I'm really passionate about it. Not the most recent episodes, mind, just the one that I feel most passionately about. So it's not going to be in chronological order, or, like I said, the most recent, or anything like that. It's just going to be the ones that I want to talk about at the time. I'll also be releasing some scripted videos that are less in the scale of a review, but still serve to talk about how I assess the quality of media, because everyone does it differently, so hopefully making a video on it will, clear the air. And in case you're wondering, yes, objectivity in art does exist, otherwise there is no such thing as a good or bad game, and I hate the idea of that, because then it means that the quality of games can never increase, which is setting your standards a bit low, don't you think? More of that in another video though. I'm also interested in making live commentary videos for Monster Hunter, preferably they be for Generations Ultimate, but I don't currently have a capture card for that, so, it'll be world. Let me know if you're interested in that though, because I'm not 100% sure about the idea. But if people want to see it, then I'll make it. Past that though, might make the occasional experimental video, and maybe in the future I might make some guides on Monster Hunter, but I'll need to figure out the format on that before I can dedicate a large amount of time to it. If you have any suggestions though, feel free to leave them in the comments, or any of my videos for that matter. Because I will consider doing it. I might not go for it, but I will at least consider it, because that is something that I kind of need right now, is to create better, more different content. That's a stupid way of putting it. You probably get what I mean. The one thing that I want to mention before you do recommend anything is considering Dark Souls. The bow-only playthrough for Dark Souls Remastered will be my last playthrough of Dark Souls. Once that's done, there's not going to be another playthrough of Dark Souls on my channel, probably ever again. I might make 1 or 2 videos on Dark Souls. I currently have one planned talking about the PvP in the series as a whole, or rather in Prepare to Die and 3, because those are the 2 that I have the most experience in. But past that, I highly doubt that I'll be making another Dark Souls video at all, because, Dark Souls 3, well, Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, 3, and Remastered has kind of just killed my interest in the franchise, which is a real shame, because Dark Souls was one of my favourite games ever of all time. And that's another topic for another time as well. One thing I want to mention, however, even if I were to work full-time on these longer videos, which I don't, YouTube is a hobby for me, they'll still take a while to make, because I'm kind of a slow worker when it comes to these videos. So, any and all patience is greatly appreciated, because these videos will take a really long time to make. I mean, even this channel intro took far too much time to make, and honestly, I feel really bad for taking this long on this video. It should have been out before New Year's Eve. It really should have, but I'm really lazy. Anyway, so with the Monster Hunter tag, the idea is to tag other content creators to kind of spread it around, so then they'll create Monster Hunter tags, then we can all, find each other quite easily with that hashtag thing. But I'm under no illusion that I'm just far too small of a channel to be able to do this properly. So instead I'm just going to name 3 channels that I recommend you guys check out. The first one is someone I've talked about before and will likely talk about again at some point in the future, Seraphim17. He does hardest difficulty walkthroughs of games and sometimes just adds more restrictions on top of that to increase the level of challenge even further. Not necessarily to show off, but to show people that the game can be completed on the hardest difficulty even with these restrictions, and Seraphim attempts to find the most reliable strategies possible to get you through the game as efficiently as you can. He has a big mouth in the best way possible. He'll talk about pretty much anything and everything. Though a word of warning, he likes his shock humor, so if you're the type of person who doesn't like people saying certain things, then it's unlikely that you'll like Seraphim's older content, because he really likes to say some outlandish things. Take that as you will. I'm fine with, because I always get a chuckle out of how absurd some of the things he says are. But yeah, not everyone's gonna really appreciate it in that way. Since I imagine there are plenty of people watching this who are interested in Monster Hunter, I'd recommend Hexaris. He hasn't uploaded it in a couple of months, but he's made some very efficient builds for you to work towards in Monster Hunter World. They might be a bit outdated now that there's even more powerful stuff in the game, but like I said, they're very efficient and very focused on putting out as much damage as possible. So if you're into speedrunning, or you just want a good optimized build to work towards, then go check him out. And for those of you who are into Warframe, I highly recommend Zandypants for a similar reason. He puts together highly synergistic builds between Warframes, their weapons, and their companions, making dangerously effective setups that don't rely on the meta and take a more active role in combat. One that I tend to use quite a lot is Gara's overshield kind of mechanic, because Gara has like higher overshields than normal. You can use her Splinter Shield ability, which just gives you flat damage resistance. Most damage resistance in Warframe doesn't apply to shields, but Gara's does. So you can have like a no survivability mod, like no redirection, no vitality, none of that, and you can get really, really tanky, like up to 95% damage reduction, I think it is. On top of that, whilst you've got that active, there's a chance that light will like reflect off of Gara and blind enemies, opening them up to finishers, which means you can one-shot them with like a covert lethality dagger. But there's a really cool dagger called the Duck dagger, which has the special effect of dealing damage to enemies that are affected by radiation, gives you shields and overshields, which will all get affected by Gara's 95% damage reduction. So you can hit them with a radiation attack from like your primary, they get blinded by the light, so to speak, and then you finish them off with the Duck dagger and you just get maximum overshields. 1500 overshields that is affected by 95% damage reduction. It's pretty nutty, and all of his builds are in a similar vein of just using a Warframe's abilities and synergize them with certain weapons and just make some amazing combos, so highly recommend him. So with all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy your stay on my channel. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.